"The dress is crooked, Mom," Chloe whispered, trying to fix the hem that had ridden up when Isabel stepped through the brightly lit entrance of the ballroom. The golden lights reflected off the ceiling's crystals, and the sound of violins filled the air with a sophistication that felt otherworldly. Isabel took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and walked in, even though her heart was pounding, as if every eye was already on her. Jewels sparkled in every corner, as if it were impossible to escape silent judgment. Men in immaculate suits, women in dresses that cost more than a year's worth of work. Isabel felt the weight of comparison, but she squeezed her daughter's hand. Chloe, just 15, stood firmly by her side, proud and determined to be the courage her mother seemed to lose with every step. A thin voice, heavy with disdain, echoed near the main staircase. "I can't believe what I'm seeing." It was Madison, the hostess of the ball, descending in a dazzling red gown, as if it had been made to dominate the entire room. All eyes turned, and her smile didn't hide the cruelty. A seamstress, and she brought her daughter. A gala isn't a place for people like you. Laughter followed, quick and sharp as knives. Isabel felt her face flush, her stomach churn. She tried to respond, but the words died in her throat. The ballroom seemed to close in around her, and for a moment she considered turning back and running. But before she could move, she felt her daughter's fingers tighten around hers. "Mom, you belong here," Chloe murmured firmly. Her eyes shone with a strength Isabel didn't know she had. Isabel blinked, swallowed hard, but still couldn't find her voice. The silence around her only deepened the feeling of being exposed. Women whispered, men raised eyebrows, and even those who didn't laugh outright did nothing to stop the spectacle. Then a chair scraped across the floor, breaking through the quartet's music with a dry sound. Andrew Blake, the evening's main host and Madison's husband, rose slowly. The gesture was so unexpected that even the waiters froze. His voice rang out firm, controlled, but filled with authority. "Before anyone laughs any further, maybe it's worth remembering that the shine of tonight exists only because of her hands." He pointed to Isabel, and every word echoed against the walls. "Without her, none of you would be flaunting the dresses that make this room so proud." The ballroom fell into a heavy silence. Madison clenched her jaw, unable to believe what she was hearing. Her eyes burned with rage, but Andrew didn't flinch. He extended his hand to Isabel, leaving no room for doubt. "May I have the honor of the first dance?" Isabel froze, her legs suddenly heavy as lead. The entire ballroom seemed to wait for her reaction, as if she was some kind of impromptu performance. Chloe nudged her, whispering, "Go, Mom." Trembling, Isabel placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, and within moments they were in the center of the ballroom, under the gaze of everyone who just minutes before had mocked her. The music resumed, and the expectant silence was replaced by the glide of feet on marble. She didn't know how to dance like the well-trained ladies of the elite, but Andrew led gently, smoothing out every awkward step. Her heart still raced out of rhythm, but now it wasn't just shame. There was something new, a strange feeling of dignity, as if for a moment she had been pulled from the role of invisible background and placed under a light she never imagined she could touch. Chloe watched from the side of the ballroom, her face glowing with pride. Madison, meanwhile, held her champagne glass so tightly it looked like it might shatter. And as the dance continued, every look in the room made one thing clear: nothing would ever be the same again. A whisper rippled through the ballroom the moment the music stopped. "What was that?" someone murmured, and the comment spread like wildfire. Isabel was still holding Andrew's hand at the center of the room, her heart beating too fast to catch every detail, but aware that the room's collective breath hovered between shock and curiosity. He released her hand slowly, as if wanting to prolong a simple gesture that carried too much weight in that charged atmosphere. With each passing second, new murmurs rose from the corners. Some disguised them with restrained laughter, others simply watched, eyes half closed, as if trying to make sense of the scene they had just witnessed. Isabel lowered her eyes, wishing she could disappear, but there was no escape. The simple dress she had sewn herself now seemed more visible than ever, as if every stitch glowed under the chandelier lights. Chloe ran to her, gripping her arm tightly, her voice low but filled with pride. "Did you see that, Mom? He made them all go quiet. All of them." She wanted to believe it, but the weight of all those eyes still dragged her down. Andrew, standing beside her, kept a neutral expression, as if he was used to bearing the weight of judgment. With a slight nod, he stepped away toward the head table, leaving behind a trail of tension no one dared to break. Madison, meanwhile, remained frozen, her fingers pressed into the stem of her champagne glass, and her smile was so stiff it looked like a mask about to crack. "Unbelievable," she said quietly, but her tone was enough to make two nearby guests step back, afraid to be caught in the fury about to erupt. The quartet resumed playing, but the lightness was gone from the ballroom. The sound of violins now served as background to persistent whispers. Small circles formed throughout the room, groups of guests murmuring, exchanging glances. Isabel knew that even without explicit words, she had become the focal point of the evening's story. She tried to move discreetly toward one of the tables, but silence trailed each step, as if the air itself were made of glass, ready to shatter. Chloe stayed close, upright and confident, unaware that her mother could barely breathe. At the top of the staircase, Andrew paused for a moment before returning to his seat. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Isabel once more. There was no smile, no grand gesture, just a look that seemed to recognize something no one else in the room had ever seen. Madison noticed. Her shoulders tightened, and when Andrew sat down, the sharp clink of her glass hitting the table rang out louder than it should have. She crossed her legs with forced elegance, but couldn't hide her fury. Isabel knelt down to adjust the hem of Chloe's dress, pretending everything was normal. Her heart still pounded, and her dry throat couldn't form words. But what shook her most was the feeling of having crossed an invisible line, the moment she stopped being the invisible seamstress and became the center of attention. "Everyone's looking, Mum," Chloe said, unafraid. "And for the first time, it's not because they want to laugh." Her daughter's words struck like a jolt, but Isabel didn't respond. She lifted her head, looked around, and realized something truly had changed. It wasn't acceptance, nor full respect. It was something different, an almost uncomfortable curiosity, as if the audience wasn't sure whether to criticize her or admire her. Andrew, seated at the head table, showed no sign of regret. The glass in his hand remained untouched. He seemed immune to the buzz around him, as if long accustomed to living through social storms. But the look he had shared with Isabel lingered in her mind. Madison stood up, her steps sharp, and walked to the center of the ballroom. With each movement, the conversations dimmed, replaced by the sharp click of her heels on the marble. When she reached Andrew, she leaned in close, speaking in a low but biting tone, loud enough for a few nearby to catch her words. "That was absurd. What were you trying to prove?" He didn't look at her right away. He waited a few seconds as if weighing each word. Then he replied, his tone cold, razor sharp. "I only proved the truth, nothing more." Madison took a step back, unable to hide her fury. Her lips trembled, and the hand clutching her purse looked ready to crush it. Still, she returned to her seat, forcing a frosty smile that fooled no one. From afar, Isabel watched. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she felt the tension in the air, like an electric current surging through the room. Every detail of that night felt seared into her memory. The cruel laughter, the humiliation, the unexpected gesture, and now the silent aftermath spreading through stares and murmurs. When the music shifted to a softer melody, a few couples returned to the dance floor, but the joy was gone. It was as if the entire ballroom had lost its balance and was trying, unconvincingly, to pretend nothing had happened. Chloe rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "You were beautiful out there. It doesn't matter what they think." Isabel took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. Amid the muffled noise, she felt her daughter's heartbeat against her arm. And in the warmth of that simple gesture, she found the only certainty that mattered. She wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Andrew, seated beside Madison, remained silent. He didn't try to justify himself or seek attention. He simply observed with a distant look, as if he already knew that what happened tonight hadn't just altered Isabel's reputation. It had changed the course of his own life as well. "Social media is talking about nothing else," said one guest, dropping her phone onto the breakfast table at one of the city's most expensive cafes. "Did you see the scene at the ball? Him dancing with the seamstress. It was surreal." The words didn't stay confined within those four walls. They echoed, spread, became unofficial news. In private groups and discreet gatherings, the elite repeated the same line. "Did you see what Andrew Blake did?" Meanwhile, at the Blake mansion, the sound of a slamming door shattered the flawless silence of the hallway. Madison strode through the room with sharp steps, her heels clicking against the marble. Andrew sat in an armchair, tie loosened, reading endless reports. She stopped in front of him, eyes blazing. "Have you lost your mind?" Her voice came out firm, almost a shout, but still laced with the restraint of someone who didn't want the staff to overhear. Andrew didn't look up right away. He calmly turned a page, as if buying time. Only then did he respond. "I don't see madness in speaking the truth." Madison leaned in, placing her hands on the arm of the chair. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You chose that woman to elevate in front of the entire city." He closed the report calmly and set it down on the glass table. Only then did he lift his gaze, cold, distant. "I didn't choose anyone. I simply acknowledged someone everyone else pretended not to see." The silence between them was razor sharp. Madison clenched her fists but backed away. There was no space for dialogue in that moment. Only the certainty that a crack had opened in what was once just the illusion of a perfect marriage. Meanwhile, Isabel's life had returned to its usual tight rhythm. The lines of the sewing machine piled up in the small makeshift workshop at home, but the metallic hum didn't drown out the whispers echoing through the narrow streets of the neighborhood. Two neighbors at the bakery spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can you imagine acting like she belongs with millionaires?" Isabel entered to buy bread, and the chatter ceased for a moment. The heavy silence said more than words. As she walked out carrying the bag, she noticed the sideways glances, some full of contempt, others of curiosity. It wasn't any different when new clients came in. Some ordered dresses, but made sure to remind her it was just a simple request. Others, who once praised her work, had begun to distance themselves. That afternoon, Isabel sewed in silence while Chloe watched from the table. Her daughter rested her chin in her hands, clearly bothered. "They're just talking because they're jealous. You shined that night, Mom. They can't stand to see that." Isabel took a deep breath, trying not to let the pain show. "Shining doesn't pay the bills, Chloe. And if they stop trusting me, how am I supposed to keep the house running?" Chloe looked up, determined. "You've faced worse. Their poison isn't going to be what brings you down now." The sound of scissors cutting fabric filled the silence that followed. Isabel felt her daughter's words like a reminder that her entire life had been built in the middle of hardship. Even so, the feeling of being judged by everyone burned inside. Elsewhere in the city, in the luxurious office of the hotel chain, Andrew scanned a series of marketing reports. In the corner of the room, two executives whispered, forgetting that he noticed everything. His wife must be furious, but it was some scene, one of them said. Andrew didn't react, but he heard every word. Deep down, he didn't regret the gesture. He knew he had stirred things up, but he hadn't imagined the waves would hit both his home and Isabel's life so directly. That night, while lavish ballrooms still echoed with commentary and humble neighborhoods buzzed with murmurs, two distinct worlds carried the same burden: judgment. Isabel, seated at her sewing machine, wrestled with the fear of losing clients. Andrew, in his silent office, endured the cold standoff of a marriage that now existed only in appearances. And on both sides, the gesture of a single dance had turned into something far bigger than either of them could have imagined. The door to the small workshop opened slowly, making the bell hanging from the frame chime softly. Isabel looked up from the fabric she was stitching, and for a moment she thought it was just another last-minute client coming in for quick alterations. But the silence that followed the sound of the door made her pause. It wasn't the curious hush of a rushed customer, but the measured stillness of someone observing. "Good afternoon." The deep, restrained male voice filled the cramped space. Isabel blinked, surprised. The man standing before her, dressed in a flawless suit, wasn't the kind of figure who typically showed up in that modest neighborhood. Andrew Blake was there, standing awkwardly among the shelves of colorful fabrics and the sewing machine still threaded from her last project. She stood up immediately, as if his presence required some special posture, but couldn't hide her embarrassment. "Mr. Blake, The words caught in her throat. Andrew stepped forward, keeping his tone direct. "I wanted to thank you." Isabel furrowed her brow. "Thank me." He glanced around, taking in the space with quiet curiosity. "The night of the ball was only possible because of you. People have already forgotten that, but I haven't." There was firmness in his voice without any need for grand gestures. It was as if every word had been carefully weighed before being spoken. Isabel, however, didn't know how to react. She clutched the fabric in her hands, gripping it like an anchor. "I was just doing my job," she said, trying to sound natural. Andrew tilted his head slightly, as if acknowledging her effort to downplay her role. "Your work carried the entire event." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but intense. Isabel wasn't used to being seen that way, not as a disposable part of the background, but as someone worthy of recognition. Still, part of her wished he'd leave before the neighbors noticed he was there. Chloe emerged from the bedroom, her eyes wide at the sight of Andrew standing in the small space. "Mom." Her tone was a mix of surprise and excitement. She crossed her arms, watching with a restrained smile, like someone witnessing a scene she'd long imagined. Isabel gave her a subtle gesture to go back, but Chloe didn't budge. Andrew, for his part, looked at the young girl with respect. "You were right that night," he said, recalling the words he'd heard when she held her mother's hand. "Your mother truly belongs in that place." Chloe's face lit up, but Isabel felt even more exposed. "You didn't have to come all the way here to say that," she replied, steady, trying to regain control of the situation. Andrew took a breath, adjusting the watch on his wrist as if measuring time. "Maybe I didn't, but I thought it mattered. The right people don't always get the recognition they deserve." For a moment, his gaze lingered on the room. The contrast was stark, the luxury of the balls and hotels he oversaw versus the humble space where fabric and thread were stored in reused boxes. But there was no contempt in his expression, only genuine interest, as if he wanted to understand more about that reality. Isabel crossed her arms, instinctively guarding herself from the intensity of the moment. "I'd rather stay out of that kind of attention. What happened at the ball was already more than enough." He nodded slowly. "I understand. I didn't come to cause more discomfort, only to thank you in person. There was something final in his words, as if that truly was all. But Isabel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind the visit. Chloe, standing nearby, watched silently, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. There was a respect in the room she had never seen someone show her mother before, a respect that needed no audience, no dramatic flair. Andrew then stepped back. I won't take up any more of your time. He gave a slight nod, as if recognizing the importance of leaving at the right moment. Isabel took a deep breath, trying to remain composed. Good afternoon, Mr. Blake. Good afternoon. He left, closing the door behind him. The bell chimed again, briefly, before silence settled back over the room. Chloe turned to her mother, a mischievous smile forming on her lips. He came all the way here just to see you. Isabel shook her head, not meeting her daughter's gaze. He was just being polite. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the weight of that visit. It wasn't just politeness, it was respect, and maybe something more, something she didn't yet dare to name. We will no longer be needing your services. The sentence dropped like a stone in Isabel's workshop. The client, an elegant middle-aged woman, adjusted her purse on her arm and stood up quickly, avoiding direct eye contact. You understand. After what happened at the ball, it just doesn't look good for us. Isabel remained still for a few seconds, the needle still between her fingers, as if her mind couldn't quite catch up with the impact of the words. When she tried to respond, the door had already slammed shut. The silence that followed felt heavier than any noise. Later that same day, another order was cancelled by phone. The excuse sounded rehearsed. We changed our minds. We don't need the dress anymore. But Isabel knew. The echo of the humiliation and exposure at the ball was still spreading through the city, eating away at what had once been just quiet, steady work. Chloe watched everything from the table, her eyes fixed on her mother. They don't understand anything. You made everyone shine, and they still want to bring you down. Isabel took a deep breath, trying to hide the pain. It's not about understanding, Chloe. It's about keeping up appearances. No one wants to be associated with someone who's become the center of gossip. Her daughter slammed her small fists on the table, furious. They don't deserve what you do, and you don't deserve this. But Isabel knew that without those orders, things at home would get tighter. The weight of the bills seemed to pile up on top of the sewing machine, growing more suffocating with each passing day. Meanwhile, in the halls of the Blake mansion, Madison plotted with venomous grace. Sitting across from an influential friend, she smiled coldly. Of course, a woman like Isabel doesn't belong in that circle. Let me handle it. The city will soon remember her place. Her words were delivered like sweet poison, slipping into discreet meetings, dinners, casual comments. In no time, rumors about Isabel spread rapidly, painting her as someone trying to climb into places where she didn't belong. Andrew heard about it during a business meeting. Two directors were whispering, thinking he wasn't listening. His wife's not happy, and that's seamstress. Word is some clients are pulling away from her because of what happened. He looked up, silencing the murmur with just his gaze. The men fell quiet instantly, but the information had already landed. That same evening, as the city quieted down, Andrew did something unexpected. He sent a trusted aide to Isabel's workshop without revealing where the request came from. The order was simple, yet challenging. The creation of an exclusive piece with a tight deadline. Isabel frowned at the unfamiliar name on the order form and the urgency of the request. Who is this person? Never heard of them, she murmured to herself, examining the sheet with the measurements. Chloe watched her, curious. Could be someone important. If it works out, it could open new doors. But Isabel hesitated. She had lost so many clients, she could hardly believe that a new project might bring anything other than more effort and disappointment. Even so, she accepted. It was that, or let the bills win. As she cut the fabric, the ache in her shoulders throbbed. But her daughter's words came back to her, "You've faced worse." Isabel remembered the years she'd worked through countless nights to support her daughter, when the world felt closed off and no one saw her struggle. Compared to that, the whispers of the elite were just another obstacle. Still, it hurt. The doors closing, the looks of disdain, the feeling of not belonging. But Isabel wouldn't let Madison's poisonous pride destroy her family's livelihood. In the quiet of the night, with Chloe fast asleep in the next room, Isabel kept sewing. With each stitch, she felt the blend of pain and resilience shaping not just the dress, but herself. And elsewhere in the city, Andrew sat alone in his office, scanning reports he wasn't really reading. His face remained composed, but his fingers tapped restlessly on the desk. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew Madison was behind the loss of Isabel's clients. And though he hadn't said anything yet, he had already decided. This time, he wouldn't just stand by. Isabel believed she was sewing for an anonymous customer. But that quiet, seemingly unremarkable project was the beginning of something that would once again change the course of her life. "It's ready." Isabel ran her hand over the finished dress and let out a long sigh, as if each stitch had drained not only her strength but also her doubts. The fabric, rich in color and perfectly cut, glowed under the dim light of the workshop. It didn't feel like just another job. There was something personal about it, as if every seam carried a quiet piece of her resilience. Chloe, sitting beside her, beamed with pride. "Mom, this is the most beautiful one you've ever made." Isabel hesitated before responding. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just too tired to see the flaws." Still, she couldn't hide the sparkle in her eyes. There was something special about the piece, though she couldn't explain exactly what. The next day, a black car pulled up in front of the modest house. A well-dressed man stepped out, rang the doorbell, and received the dress with formality. He didn't say much, only a brief, "Thank you. It will be delivered on time." Isabel closed the door slowly, her heart racing. "Delivered on time for what?" she asked aloud, but no answer came. That same evening, in the event hall of one of the Blake Hotel properties, Andrew moved among important guests. The rooms sparkled under massive chandeliers, and the sound of clinking glasses mingled with quiet conversations. It was a corporate gathering, but with the flair of a gala. When the dress was presented, all eyes turned. The model stepped onto the stage wearing the piece Isabel had sewn, and a murmur swept through the room. The cut, the simple elegance, the perfection in every detail made it immediately clear. This wasn't just a dress. Andrew stood beside the podium. His voice, firm and calm, cut through the silence of admiration. This dress was made by a seamstress many of you know only by name. She's not here with us tonight, but her work speaks louder than any introduction I could give. The credit for tonight belongs to her. There was a moment of surprise. Some guests exchanged glances, immediately recalling the scandal from the ball. Others remained silent, unsure whether to applaud. Andrew didn't wait for the room's approval. He continued, "Recognition shouldn't be a privilege for the few. It's easy to applaud those already at the top. What's hard is recognizing genuine talent when it comes from where we least expect it." His words echoed through the room, making many uncomfortable. Still, the dress shone under the lights, impossible to ignore. Back at the workshop, Chloe was scrolling on her phone when she found a clip from the event. Her eyes lit up as she showed it to her mother. "Look, Mom, they're talking about your dress." Isabel held the phone with trembling hands. Her heart pounded as she heard her name mentioned among soft but sincere applause. For a moment, she forgot the doors that had closed and the whispers that had followed her. There, in front of everyone, her work had been recognized without disguise. Across town, Madison watched the scene on a tablet, her lips curved in a poisonous smile. Her wineglass nearly slipped from her hand when Andrew said Isabel's name publicly. Rage filled her eyes, but she kept her posture straight, already planning her next move. At the event, the dress received applause at the end of the presentation. It wasn't thunderous, but it wasn't timid enough to be ignored. It was confirmation that Isabel, even in absence, had earned respect through her craft. As Andrew stepped off the stage, he didn't smile or celebrate. He simply shook hands with a few executives as if everything had gone as expected. But deep down, he knew that night had changed something. For him, for Isabel, and for everyone who had judged her. In the small workshop, Isabel leaned back in her chair, exhausted but with a quiet smile on her face. For the first time since the ball, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She felt somehow like she was starting to win. Chloe hugged her tightly. "I told you you'd do it. I always knew." The silence that followed was light, almost sweet. Isabel closed her eyes and let the feeling of dignity wash over her. She still didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was now undeniable. She was no longer invisible, and this time everyone had seen her. "I shouldn't be here." Isabel dropped the scissors on the table, the metallic sound echoing through the silent workshop. Andrew stood in front of her, unfazed by the wall her words tried to build. "But you are," he replied, his voice firm and low. Isabel gripped the fabric in her hands, as if she needed something to shield herself. "If anyone finds out, if anyone sees, they'll destroy what's left of me." Andrew stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. "They've already tried to destroy you, Isabel, and you're still standing. This isn't about being seen, it's about seeing what's real." His simple words landed on her like a truth too hard to deny. For days, discreet meetings like this had become routine. Andrew would show up unexpectedly, sometimes at the workshop, other times in neutral places. Their conversations were brief, but charged with a tension that grew with every encounter. These weren't exchanges of promises, but of recognition. Chloe watched from a distance. The daughter, perceptive as ever, noticed the change in her mother's eyes. The weight of humiliation seemed lighter, her posture straighter. Still, there was fear. Fear of what people might say, fear of what they might do. One afternoon after Andrew had left, Chloe broke the silence. "He likes you." Isabel, caught off guard, nearly dropped the fabric. "Don't say that. It's true, I can see it, and you see it too." Her mother sighed, turning her eyes away. "It's not that simple, Chloe. He's married, and people already talk too much. Let them talk. What matters is how he treats you. For the first time, someone's looking at you the way I always hoped someone would." Chloe's words hit Isabel like a blow, but she didn't respond. She simply went back to sewing, trying to lose herself in the rhythm of the machine. But her mind stayed locked on Andrew's eyes. Meanwhile, in the Blake mansion, Madison finally got the confirmation she had been waiting for. A loyal employee reported seeing Andrew entering the modest neighborhood where Isabel lived. The news spread like wildfire. That same night, Madison waited for her husband to return. He entered the grand hall, took off his jacket, and was heading upstairs when her voice stopped him. "How many times have you been with her?" Andrew froze mid-step. He didn't feign surprise, didn't offer excuses. He simply met her gaze, his eyes steady, almost defiant. "You already know the answer." Madison's face contorted. The composed socialite vanished, replaced by raw fury. "You humiliated me in front of everyone at the ball, and now you dare to disgrace me by bringing that woman into our world. You're going to throw away everything we built." Andrew took a deep breath, resting his hands on the staircase railing. "What we built was image, Madison. Just image. You want power, status. I just wanted truth." Her scream echoed through the house. Truth? With a seamstress? The impact was so intense that even the staff stepped back, trying not to be seen. The silence that followed was heavier than the shout. Andrew didn't respond immediately. He climbed one step, then another, before pausing to give her one final look. "She has more dignity than all the gold you flaunt." Madison stood frozen, her breathing ragged, the crystal glass cracking in her hand. At the workshop, Isabel didn't know about the confrontation, but she felt the weight of their growing closeness. The fear of becoming a target again made her hesitate. Still, when Andrew returned days later, she didn't send him away. They spoke little, but every word carried an invisible strength binding them. "They'll never accept us," Isabel said, her voice choked. "I don't need their acceptance," Andrew replied. "I just need you not to hide." Chloe, listening from the cracked door, smiled. There was no doubt left. Her mother's heart was no longer alone, but the cost of that truth was beginning to show. And for the first time, Isabel understood that this wasn't just about her. It was a battle against what the world insisted was unchangeable, and Madison was ready to fight to the bitter end. The sound of the event hall door closing behind Andrew echoed like a sharp beat, a cut through the music that filled the space. A few heads turned immediately, and the chatter that had once dominated the room faded into a distant hum. He entered alone. No Madison, no flawless figure by his side. His presence alone was enough to create tension, but her absence only amplified the curiosity in every gaze. Isabel, standing near one side of the room, nearly let her glass slip from her hand when she saw Andrew walking toward her. Chloe, ever alert, was the first to notice the determination in his steps. She squeezed her mother's hand tightly, a silent message, "Don't move, don't step back." Andrew walked in a straight line, eyes locked forward. He didn't stop to greet businessmen, didn't smile at acquaintances. His expression was serious, resolute, and the silence spread around him like a wave. It was as if the crowd instinctively parted, sensing something significant was about to happen. Isabel felt her face flush, her heart beating out of rhythm. In her mind, the urge to disappear wrestled with the need to face the moment. She had never felt so exposed, not even at the ball, when she had been mocked. Here now, she knew every eye was dissecting her, measuring her reaction, judging her place. When Andrew finally stopped in front of her, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. He didn't give a speech. He didn't look for rehearsed words or justifications. He simply extended his hand, direct, clear, without a trace of hesitation. That single gesture carried more weight than any declaration. Isabel's eyes widened, stunned. That outstretched hand, offered in front of everyone, meant far more than an invitation to dance. It was a public act, undeniable, a definitive break from the image of a perfect marriage Andrew had upheld for years. Chloe looked up at her mother, her eyes shining with emotion and pride. "Go on, Mom," she whispered, almost voiceless. Isabel took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling quickly. Her throat was dry, but she had no words. She simply lifted her hand, trembling, and placed it in his. The contact was immediate, firm. Andrew interlaced his fingers with hers and didn't look away. There was no performance in his gesture, no rush, only conviction. The ballroom froze. Some guests covered their mouths in shock. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether to protest or pretend nothing was happening. Isabel's name, whispered in scandalous tones just weeks before, now echoed again, but this time with astonishment, not contempt. The background music, which had filled the space until then, seemed to fade in the face of the scene. The gesture was so straightforward, it needed no soundtrack. Its simplicity made it devastating, Andrew holding Isabel's hand without fear for everyone to see. Several seconds stretched into eternity. Isabel, her eyes misty, stood her ground. There was no wide smile, but there was no retreat either. She didn't try to hide. She didn't pull her hand away. She accepted the gesture the way one accepts their truth. Chloe, beside her, discreetly wiped a tear. For the first time, she saw her mother in a place of full dignity, recognized without needing to explain herself. The whispers began quietly, then grew louder. "Has he lost his mind?" murmured a woman in a glittering gown. "He's really holding her hand, in front of everyone." Another guest replied, "It's more than that. He's chosen a side." And he had. Andrew didn't need words to make it clear. He had broken with the image built alongside Madison. He stood with Isabel, and that was enough. In a corner of the ballroom, some staff exchanged tense glances. They knew this would be the talk of the entire city by morning. Older businessmen furrowed their brows, worried about the fallout. But among the younger guests, a few faces showed something else: admiration for the boldness of the act. Time seemed suspended. Andrew gently squeezed Isabel's hand, as if reaffirming his decision. There was no turning back. Still disoriented, Isabel glanced around. She felt the weight of high society on her shoulders, but at the same time, something inside her stood taller. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. She wasn't being used or humiliated. She was being seen, recognized, chosen. Her eyes met Andrew's, and in that moment, there was no crowd, no judgment. Just the two of them, united by a gesture that spoke more than any speech ever could. Chloe clutched her mother's arm, overcome with emotion. "You're not alone. Not anymore." The music resumed, filling the room again, but the ballroom was still in shock. No sound seemed loud enough to drown out what had just unfolded. Andrew, Isabel, and Chloe stood together, steady, under the disbelieving gaze of an elite that didn't know how to react. Some turned away, unable to look. Others kept staring, as if refusing to believe. But it didn't matter anymore. The gesture had been made. It was final. Isabel took a deep breath, her heart racing, but her posture straight. She felt strangely light, as if she had finally released a weight she had carried for years. Andrew kept her hand in his until the last possible second, in silence. He didn't need to say a word. The recognition was there, plain for all to see, impossible to erase. And so, in a ballroom frozen in shock, the story reached its close. Not with speeches or promises, but with a silent gesture that changed everything. A simple gesture that made one thing unmistakably clear: Isabel's life would never be the same again.
What it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.